Another really bad resolution mechanism that happens all the time is just who's more stubborn, and whichever one gets exhausted first. But it doesn't lead to truth.
Over the years, Jeff Bezos has been called a lot of things. Tech mastermind, ruthless dealmaker, space race pioneer, and one of the richest humans walking the planet. But behind all those headlines, there was a man very few people truly knew. That all changed the moment his first marriage to Mackenzie Scott came crashing down in the public eye. And trust me, the truth was messier than anyone could have imagined. Because here's the thing. There's a whole side to Jeff and Mackenzie's story that stayed locked behind closed doors for decades. Secrets only Mackenzie knew. Not even Lauren Sánchez, the woman who later married him, had a clue. And these revelations weren't just gossip. They were at the heart of why that 25-year marriage suddenly ended. Today, that buried layer is finally coming into the light, and it's going to make you see this billionaire in a whole new way. January 2019. The world wakes up to the shocking news. Jeff Bezos and Mackenzie Scott are done, calling it quits after a quarter century together. People everywhere were asking, why now? What happened? But the divorce announcement was just the opening act. The real jaw-dropper came days later. Boom! The National Enquirer drops explosive claims, explicit texts, hush-hush meetups, and private photos allegedly swapped between Bezos and former TV anchor Lauren Sánchez. Overnight, Jeff's personal life bulldozed political headlines and even celebrity scandals off the front page. For weeks, the world couldn't look away. Every new leak adding more shock to the fire. The public ate up the story like it was a soap opera. The headline was clean, easy, and scandalous. Jeff Bezos left his wife for another woman. Everyone had an opinion, everyone was pointing fingers, and the same question kept coming up. What more could a man like him possibly want? I mean, here's someone who had it all. A billion-dollar empire, a partner who helped him build it brick by brick, and a family they raised together. From the outside, it looked perfect, but appearances lie. Fast forward a few years after the divorce and the noise dies down. That's when a far more tangled, far quieter truth slipped into the light. One almost no one knew until now. Because according to Bezos himself, Mackenzie wasn't blindsided by Lauren Sánchez. She knew. In fact, she knew about Lauren long before the rest of the world ever caught a whiff of that media storm. Before the scandal splashed across tabloids, before the blackmail threats, before Jeff went public, Mackenzie was already in the loop. Bezos even hinted at something jaw-dropping, that Mackenzie, in her own way, gave him permission to walk away before he ever did. He called it her final gift to him. But this story only gets stranger. Because Lauren Sánchez, she had met Mackenzie years before the divorce ever happened. It wasn't a red carpet run-in or a fancy party. No, this was in Lauren's own office. The meeting was short, polite, and carried this weird, unsettling calm. Mackenzie had walked in unannounced, exchanged a few words. When Lauren Sánchez saw Mackenzie walk through that door, she braced herself for fireworks. A furious wife ready to tear into her over an affair that had set the world buzzing. But instead of anger, threats, or bitter accusations, Mackenzie delivered something far more unsettling. No screaming, no insults, just a calm, almost cryptic warning laced with hard-earned wisdom. She carried herself like a woman who had already lived through the highs and lows of loving Jeff Bezos and understood exactly what the price could be. To the public, it was easy to frame this as a messy love triangle gone wrong. But this revelation flips that story on its head. It wasn't betrayal, it was a passing of the torch. Mackenzie didn't cling, didn't fight, didn't launch some revenge crusade. She signed the papers, took her settlement, and stepped away. Quietly, gracefully, like someone who already made peace with the ending long before the headlines hit. Because the truth? Lauren wasn't the reason their marriage unraveled. The real damage had been brewing for years, caused by something far more personal and far more dangerous than money or the crushing weight of running Amazon. Jeff had been carrying a truth so heavy, so deeply buried, that even he struggled to face it. And when Mackenzie uncovered it, the cracks in their marriage became impossible to hide. It wasn't greed, it wasn't power. It was a secret no one, not even the world's sharpest gossip hounds, could have guessed. She was never meant to find out. Not then, not ever. It all began with a journal. Not just any journal. but one of Jeff Bezos' old leather-bound notebooks from the scrappy garage days of Amazon, back when they survived on takeout and 3 hours of sleep a night. Mackenzie stumbled across it while packing books in their old Seattle home, expecting to find scribbled business plans or half-formed ideas for the empire they were building together. But instead, she found something far more personal. Inside, tucked between the pages, was a single letter. The envelope was worn, the handwriting deliberate. It was addressed to a man Mackenzie had only ever heard about in fragments. The father who had walked out on Jeff. She opened it and started to read. And what spilled out wasn't strategy or ambition. It was raw, jagged emotion, a fury that felt almost childlike in its pain. Jeff wrote about the abandonment, the years of silence, and how every step of his life was building toward one goal, making his father regret ever leaving him. In that moment, Mackenzie saw a side of her husband she had never known. Suddenly, Amazon, Blue Origin, even the polished image of visionary billionaire, none of it was about customers, innovation, or legacy. It was all for the ghost of a man Jeff barely knew. And that realization shook her. Because if everything he built wasn't driven by passion, but by spite, what did that mean for the life they had built together? Mackenzie told Jeff exactly what she saw, and though he brushed it off deep down, he knew she was right. Years later, starting a new chapter with Lauren Sánchez, Jeff decided he wanted a clean slate. And so, for the first time, he laid bare this hidden truth, the secret that had fueled his empire from day one. Lauren sat frozen, staring at Jeff Bezos as he laid it all out, the truth behind the end of his marriage. And it wasn't the tabloid version. He told her Mackenzie didn't walk away because of an affair. She walked away because she feared their kids would grow up chasing a love they might never get. She'd seen the shadow of Jeff's past, the risk of him becoming the very man who had once walked out on him.
This morning, Mackenzie Scott, ex-wife of the world's richest man, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, is officially off the mark.
The affair was just noise. The real fracture came from something deeper. The boy Jeff used to be, standing at a window waiting for a father who never showed. Mackenzie couldn't watch that cycle repeat. She wasn't just leaving a man. She was breaking a curse. For the first time, Lauren Sánchez saw beyond the billionaire headlines and space race dreams. She saw the wounded son, still stacking achievements like skyscrapers, desperate to impress someone who would never see them. That truth hit harder than any scandal. After Jeff bared his soul, he made a move no one expected, one that proved he was serious about starting fresh. Once the divorce dust settled, the world moved on. But Jeff was already rewriting his own story. He stepped down as Amazon's CEO, shedding the skin of the man the world thought they knew, and stepped into a new role, the bold architect chasing not just profits, but the stars themselves. Mackenzie Scott wasn't just turning the page after the divorce, she was rewriting the entire book. Practically overnight, she became one of the top 5 wealthiest people on the planet. Everyone assumed she'd step into the usual billionaire role, red carpets, yachts, and dripping in luxury. But instead, she shocked the world. No press tours, no look at me moments. Instead, she quietly started moving billions into the hands of those who needed it most. Food, banks, women's shelters, education programs, climate projects. And she didn't trickle it out over decades like most billionaires. In just 2 years, she gave away more than some of the richest people do in their entire lifetime. And she didn't ask for a single ounce of spotlight in return. Her path and Jeff's couldn't have been more different since the split. And with each passing day, it became harder to picture the two of them ever fitting in the same frame again. Still, their love story had been one for the history books in America's business world. And some moments from it, they're almost unreal. Long before Amazon was a household name, there was just Jeff and Mackenzie, two ambitious dreamers, sharing a cramped New York apartment, working corporate jobs, and imagining a future way bigger than anyone around them could see. Back then, Mackenzie was still Mackenzie Tuttle. The year was 1992. She was a fresh research associate at D.E. Shaw, a Manhattan hedge fund, when she crossed paths with Jeffrey Preston Bezos, then a senior vice president. Their first meeting was strictly professional, but for Mackenzie, his booming laugh and confident razor-sharp mind left a mark she'd never forget. In just a few short months, their connection went from casual office hellos to something far deeper. By 1993, Jeff and Mackenzie were husband and wife. This wasn't some lukewarm corporate romance. It was a partnership fueled by shared curiosity, big dreams, and a vision of the future that went way beyond climbing the next rung on the career ladder. They were fiercely loyal to each other, a rare thing in the cutthroat business world of the early 90s. Mackenzie, with her English degree from Princeton, had studied under none other than Nobel laureate Toni Morrison. She was a budding novelist with a deep love for words and a razor-sharp analytical mind. Jeff, also a Princeton graduate, was cut from a different cloth. An engineer and computer science whiz, obsessed with systems, optimization, and thinking decades ahead. They were opposites in all the right ways. Mackenzie was thoughtful, private, and quietly intense. Jeff was bold, calculated, and driven by wild, game-changing ideas. Then, in 1994, Jeff walked through the door with a proposal that would turn their world upside down. He wanted to quit his steady job and launch an online bookstore. It was bold, it was risky, and it was about to change not just their lives, but the world. Back then, the internet was still a wild frontier. Most people laughed at the idea that it could ever become a serious marketplace. But Mackenzie didn't flinch. She believed in Jeff more than the plan itself, and that faith became the foundation of everything. They packed up their lives, crammed their belongings into the car, and drove from New York to Seattle, building a business plan in the backseat along the way. Seattle became ground zero for their gamble. The first Amazon office wasn't some sleek startup hub. It was their garage. Mackenzie wasn't just cheering from the sidelines. She was in the trenches. She kept the books, ran early operations, fielded customer service calls, and even negotiated Amazon's first freight contracts and vendor deals. She was the quiet architect behind the logistics, while Jeff was out front chasing the vision. At first, Amazon was just an online bookstore. Then it exploded into a global marketplace, and with every expansion came heavier demands on Jeff's time. He stepped fully into the spotlight, investor pitches, tech conferences. Mackenzie, in contrast, chose the shadows. She poured herself into raising their 4 children, 3 biological, 1 adopted from China, and kept their family world fiercely private. Even with Jeff's growing fame and the kind of wealth that could have bought them Hollywood-style opulence, they lived simply.
Basically, you need to be stubborn on your vision, because otherwise it'll be too easy to give up.
Mackenzie kept writing, publishing her debut novel, The Testing of Luther Albright, in 2005, a book that went on to win an American Book Award. And while the cameras followed Jeff, she kept working quietly behind the scenes, investing her time in parenting, education, and philanthropy, far from the glare of the public eye. Friends always described Jeff and Mackenzie as strangely grounded for a couple sitting on a mountain of wealth. They had routines, they valued home life, and even with an empire to run, Jeff made time for small gestures, famously bragging that doing the dishes after dinner was the sexiest thing he could do. But behind those charming domestic details, Amazon was transforming from a scrappy online bookstore into a globe-conquering tech giant, swallowing up industries from books and music to cloud computing, logistics, and beyond. Through it all, Mackenzie stayed firmly out of the spotlight. She released her second novel, Traps, in 2013 and filled her days with quieter, meaningful work. Volunteering at their children's school, championing anti-bullying causes, and slowly shaping her identity as a philanthropist. But the differences in their public lives were becoming harder to ignore. Jeff was evolving into a high-powered, headline-making force with influence across the world. Mackenzie stayed rooted in privacy, simplicity, and moral clarity. That gap kept widening, and eventually, the pressures of running one of the world's largest companies mixed with the shifting realities of wealth, media attention, and personal reinvention. It started quietly. Less shared time, different circles, a growing emotional distance. Those closest to them noticed, even if the public didn't. By the time January 2019 arrived, the announcement of their divorce shocked the world, but not the people in their inner orbit. And in true Bezos-Scott fashion, it ended without public mudslinging. Mackenzie walked away with grace, allowing Jeff to keep 75% of their Amazon stock and full voting control of the empire they had built together. Mackenzie walked away with 25% of their Amazon stake, a staggering $36 billion at the time, instantly making her one of the richest women on the planet. Jeff, meanwhile, threw himself even deeper into his passion projects. Blue Origin became more than just a side venture. It was his ticket to shaping humanity's future in space. By 2021, he had stepped down as Amazon's CEO, freeing himself to speak out more on climate change and roll out bold philanthropic promises. In 2022, he made headlines again, announcing his intention to give away the majority of his fortune. For Jeff Bezos, the mission was always bigger than money. It was about leaving a mark on the world. But to really understand that drive, you have to go back to the very beginning, long before Amazon, long before Blue Origin, before he became the wealthiest man alive. Jeffrey Preston Bezos started life as a quiet, intensely curious boy obsessed with figuring out how things worked. Born Jeffrey Preston Jorgensen on January 12, 1964, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, he came into the world to a teenage mother, Jacqueline Gies, and Ted Jorgensen, a bike shop owner and part-time circus performer. His mother was just 17, juggling the chaos of school, work, and motherhood. That first marriage lasted barely a year. When Jeff was just over 1, Jacqueline remarried a Cuban immigrant named Miguel Mike Bezos. Mike not only stepped in as a father, but formally adopted Jeff, giving him the name the world would one day know, a name he would stamp on one of the most powerful companies in history. Mike Bezos' own story could have been a movie. At just 15, he fled Cuba alone, learned English from scratch, put himself through college, and built a solid career in the oil and gas industry. For Jeff, Mike wasn't just a stepfather, he was one of the most influential figures in his life. The day Mike adopted him marked a permanent break from his biological father, whom Jeff never saw or spoke to again. From then on, the name Bezos would grow into one of the most recognizable in the world. Jeff's early childhood played out in Houston, Texas, where Mike worked as an engineer for Exxon. Even as a toddler, Jeff's mind worked differently. He once dismantled his own crib with a screwdriver because he wanted to sleep in a real bed. Household appliances didn't stand a chance. He'd take them apart just to see how they worked. A huge influence came from his maternal grandfather, Lawrence Preston Gies, a regional director for the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. Jeff spent countless summers at his grandparents' ranch in Cotulla, Texas, soaking up a hands-on, self-reliant lifestyle. There, he learned to repair windmills, vaccinate cattle, and fix stubborn tractors. He might not have carried those skills into his career directly, but they sharpened his patience, precision, and methodical approach to solving problems. Eventually, the family relocated to Miami, Florida. By the time Jeff reached Miami Palmetto Senior High School, his curiosity had laser focused. He was hooked on computers and technology, setting the stage for the empire he'd one day build. In high school, Jeff Bezos wasn't just a standout. He was the kid teachers talked about for years afterward. He excelled in math and science, but his imagination was already orbiting far beyond the classroom. He attended the student science training program at the University of Florida, earned National Merit Scholar honors, and in 1982 stood before his graduating class as valedictorian, declaring a bold dream. One day, humanity would colonize space. Decades later, that teenage vision would roar back to life through Blue Origin. But Jeff wasn't just a brain, he had hustle. Still in high school, he launched his first real venture, the Dream Institute, an educational summer camp for 4th, 5th, and 6th graders focused on science, literature, and, of course, space. He ran it out of a local elementary school, charged $600 per student, and while it didn't make him rich, it proved something far more important. Even at 17, he could lead, organize, and build something from scratch. That same year, Jeff was accepted into Princeton University with plans to major in physics. But after a few grueling semesters competing with some of the brightest mathematical minds in the world, he made a strategic pivot. switching to electrical engineering and computer science. It was a decision that would change the course of his life. At Princeton, Jeff found his people. He spent countless late nights in the computer lab, immersing himself in the emerging world of information systems, a space where logic, creativity, and ambition could collide to create something revolutionary. Among his Princeton peers, Jeff Bezos had a reputation: intense, hyper-focused, and relentlessly ambitious. Professors called him methodical, deeply inquisitive, and unwilling to leave a problem unsolved. By 1986, he graduated summa cum laude and instantly became a hot commodity in the job market. Intel, Bell Labs, Anderson Consulting, the offers poured in. But Jeff didn't take the obvious route. Instead, he joined a small telecom startup called Fattel, helping to build an international trade network for banks. At Fattel, he got his first taste of real-world systems engineering and business logistics, but it wasn't enough. His ambitions stretched far beyond designing tools for banks. By 1988, he had moved to Bankers Trust, and within 2 years, at just 26, he was a vice president. Impressive, yes, but still not the stage he was chasing. The real turning point came in 1990 when Jeff joined E. Shaw & Company, a cutting-edge quantitative hedge fund founded by computer scientist David E. Shaw. The culture was tailor-made for him, a place where analytical thinking, computational modeling, and unconventional ideas weren't just encouraged, they were celebrated. Jeff thrived. By 1992, at only 28 years old, he had climbed to senior vice president, one of the youngest in the firm's history, pulling in a 7-figure salary and the full respect of his peers. But here's the thing. Even then, he wasn't satisfied. While at D.E. Shaw, Jeff stumbled across a statistic that lit the fuse for everything that came next. Internet usage was growing at over 2,300% a year. And to him, that number wasn't just data. It was the opening to change the world. That 2,300% growth figure wasn't just a statistic, it was a flashing neon sign only Jeff Bezos seemed to notice. To him, it screamed one truth. The future would be digital, and whoever planted their flag first could shape it entirely. So he got to work drafting a list of products that could be sold online. CDs, software, electronics. But one stood out above the rest: books. They were universal, easy to ship, and had an endless variety. By 1993, Jeff was sketching out the blueprint for what would become the world's largest bookstore, a move that wasn't just bold, it was a leap straight into the unknown. But big leaps need strong believers. And Jeff found his in Mackenzie Tuttle, the sharp-minded researcher and writer who worked just a few desks away at D.E. Shaw. She didn't just believe in him, she strapped in for the ride. Together, they laid the groundwork for Amazon, transforming it from a risky idea into a force that would rewrite the rules of global commerce. Even though their marriage eventually ended, what Jeff and Mackenzie built was something rare. A partnership that fused love, ambition, and vision into a legacy that still shapes the world today. So now, with Jeff's bombshell confession to Lauren Sánchez out in the open, what do you think? Did this buried truth really play a role in the end of his first marriage? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed diving into this story, make sure you like, share, and hit subscribe. Because here at NoFilter, we drop daily celebrity gossip every single day.